So what we're going to do is we're here to expose it, let people tell their story, and let everybody in the public see the horrors of the court system in Suffolk County, New York.
Long Island Backstory with Chief Correspondent Gary Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Gary Jacobs, and welcome to another edition of Long Island Backstory, where we're filming at the Cablevision Studios in Hauppauge, New York. My guest today is Dr. Roy Aranda, who's been a guest on the show before. But when you hear the subject that we're going to talk about today, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, suicide, and the focus, which is something called post-traumatic growth, you'll see why Dr. Aranda is really the best person to have on the show. Dr. Aranda earned his psychiatric degree from Rutgers University and 2-year postdoctoral degree in neuropsychology, as well as a law degree in 2007. Dr. Aranda has performed hundreds of forensic evaluations and has testified as an expert witness in many high-profile cases. His resume is pages long and very impressive, but trust me, again, as I tell you, Dr. Aranda is definitely the person that we want to speak to when it comes to this subject. And what made me think about doing this show is we did a show recently about suicide as it relates to divorce, and there's different statistics, and Dr. Aranda has some also, but the suicide rate is just very high when it comes to divorce, and attempted suicide, of course, is even higher. Depression, PTSD, it's a really, really huge problem. But I was at a lecture the other night with Jeffrey Deskovic, who was wrongfully convicted and spent 17 years in jail. And one of the questions, he's going to law school now that he got out of jail. And one of the questions that was going through my mind is, what makes somebody who goes through a horrible traumatic event take that road and go one direction and grow from it and learn from it and end up having a happy life, and then somebody go take the other road and end up becoming depressed? And many times people will ask me, after I went through a horrible divorce and alienation from my children, how do you always seem to be, so upbeat, and you have the ability to help others and go to work? And I really don't know the answer. I have some ideas, and I'm hoping Dr. Aranda will give us some insight into, I guess, what made me choose that. So Dr. Aranda, I spoke enough. You're the expert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while, but I'm glad to be here again.
So first, let's start off. Tell everybody what is PTSD, just briefly, so most people know, but give a brief description about what PTSD is.
Well, PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's a syndrome that involves a constellation of symptoms: depression, anxiety, vivid recollections of an incident that was either life-threatening or potentially injurious to yourself or someone else that you witnessed it. And it's very, very emotionally devastating. It's something that results in loss of sleep, results in alienation, staying away from people. It affects your ability to function, to think, to enjoy life, and it has many of these consequences that can be very enduring. Many people who have PTSD, they'll recover with proper support, and if it wasn't particularly overwhelming or serious, and they get back to work and they're able to function, they tend to be able to get over it. Others, it's more lifelong and enduring, and you have ups and downs, and anything can bring you back there again.
Now, explain to the audience, what is post-traumatic growth?
Well, post-traumatic growth is like a nifty term that's put together, that was coined together, give or take about 25 years ago. And it really reflects something that, it's not new. It reflects something that people who are able to withstand adversity and recover and go forward in their lives, what are some of the things that these people are doing, as opposed to individuals who fall into patterns of helplessness and hopelessness and depression and social withdrawal and social avoidance. So it's it reflects on growth experiences in the aftermath of traumatic events and adversity. And let me say that nobody alive has escaped adversity. I mean, everybody has in some way experienced some sort of a traumatic episode. And by this, I just wanted to point out what some of these traumatic losses are. We're dealing with perhaps serious illnesses, loss of a job, financial setbacks, accidents, injuries, violence, domestic violence, sexual assaults, problems with children, with loved ones, veterans who are experiencing difficulty with coming back, with being reintegrated into society, and also coping with suicide. So these are some examples, and just to give you a sense of what the numbers look like, and I apologize that I'm trying to read, but I want to make sure that I get the statistics out there. But PTSD, 6 out of every 10 men suffer or have had at some point in time in their lives PTSD. 5 of every 10 women will experience sexual assault, child sexual abuse. We have about 7 or 8 out of 100 people who will present with PTSD, and at any given moment, about 8 million people have PTSD. Any given moment. Another super source of stress is divorce. We're looking at a rate of approximately 42%, and there are greater risk factors for people who suffer from clinical depression or substance use disorders. And this is most significantly associated with divorce when you have clinical depression or substance abuse disorder. Suicide, 10th leading cause of death in the United States, claims the lives of pushing 45,000 Americans every year. And for every suicide, there are 25 attempts, just to give you an idea of
it's crazy.
The magnitude of this problem.
And we see that going through divorce all the time. That's what I do a lot, and I can't tell you the percentage is so high of people who have, the people who committed suicide. Unfortunately, I know people who have, but the people who have attempted suicide, that they just feel there's nothing else I can do. I'm just hopeless. And then the people who thought about it, I would say it's over 50% who have told me that going through a bad divorce, they've thought about suicide during the now whether they took how far they took it, but it's just it's staggering that it could be pushed to that number.
Thoughts of suicide can be fairly commonplace. People who suffer from occupational injuries or accidents or illnesses, chronic debilitating illnesses, acute traumatic events. It may dawn on them. I mean, can you imagine somebody who's suffering from chronic rheumatoid arthritis and been going on for 20 years, and they think to themselves, life like this is not worth living. So we have passive suicidal ideation, as opposed to really more serious or formal suicide thoughts, where it becomes risky when there's a plan, when you start seeing things like behavioral changes, emotional changes, social isolation, withdrawal, or increased recklessness, or somebody giving away all of his or her belongings and saying goodbye, writing a will all of a sudden. These are some telltale risk signs that need to be looked at. And in terms of this post-traumatic growth, I think that there are many steps that can be taken. I think it's an important psychoeducational piece for the public to learn this. We're doing a program like this, for instance, as far as I'm concerned, it's psychoeducational. It's an educational piece for the public to learn. People can develop these kinds of skills. They can learn how to face adversity more effectively. There's components to this, for instance, resilience being able to bounce back from adversity and go forward. So you're bouncing forward. Right. You're going forward. That's the whole point of post-traumatic growth. You had an issue. How do you cope with it? What do you do with it? And I think that individuals who are, again, everybody, that's why I preface it by saying that everybody has had some moment of adversity in his or her life. And you have to think to yourself, what did it mean to me? How significant was it to me? How debilitating was it to me? What did I learn from it? How did I grow? How did I develop? Did I develop some ability going forward to cope with something similar or even something different in the future? Was it a learning experience for me, and was it a constructive learning experience for me? So there are a number of steps that can be taken, and I want to impress upon the public that that it starts really with identifying what's the source of stress. What was it? In fact, divorce? Is it loss of children? Is it a financial loss? Is it like you're fed up with being chronically ill for 20 years? Do you have an acute stress? Did you lose your job? Did your wife leave you? Did you suffer a fatality in your family? Loss of a child is horrible. The recent experience in Manhattan, where that guy under the influence of drugs mowed down all the people in Midtown Manhattan, killed a young woman, and I think she was like 17-ish, and the father actually had to come, travel to see her. Can you imagine how devastating that loss was for him? And what about the bystanders, the people who were in the zone of fire, who were injured themselves, but also those who witnessed it? This is very traumatic. Of course, they are going to develop signs of PTSD and chronic depression. So you need to first identify what is it that is the adversity. What's the stressor for you? Monitor it. What do you want to change? What are your abilities? What are your liabilities? What are the abilities are basically your positives, you know, the sources that you can count on. The liabilities are risk factors, things that you need to look at to try to hope that you can change. If you have no social outlets, you don't have any income, you don't have any family that supports you, these are liabilities. With the risk of suicide being so significant and so high, it's important for people also to consider a safety plan. You know, what sort of a safety plan can you formulate, either for yourself or for your loved ones or friends who you think are experiencing this
Meaning if you're at the end and you think, look, I'm getting ready to kill myself, that you say, well, I would call this person and not be alone. I mean, I've had people call me and say, hey, I'm gonna come over your house because I don't want to be alone.
But that's part of a safety plan. You need to first be able to identify in the safety plan what are the risk factors for this particular individual. What kind of risk factors are there? Alcohol, substances, being alone, access to prescribed medication, access to illegal medication, lethal methods, having access to a gun,
right,
for instance, sharps in the house, you know, like knives all over the place,
right,
for somebody who's like thinking, you know, should I not? And especially if there was previous risk factor. If there was a previous incident, that's predictive of that's a risk factor for a future kind of
So it's not
episode.
true when you hear somebody say, well, they said they committed suicide, but they didn't really do it. They were trying to get attention. They're never going to really do it. That's not true.
Well, it's not. And do you really, you have all of these false negatives, so you're going to wait for the first true positive to come around?
Right.
It's for people to talk about it, something is wrong. I mean, even if it's a way of seeking attention, isn't that telling you that something's wrong? Right. Something's the matter. They're reaching out for help in some way, shape, or form. And unfortunately, individuals who hear this and they become like sort of desensitized to it.
Right.
Cops, first responders who are witnessing this all the time, after a while they become desensitized to it.
Right.
You know, they'll take pictures of it and they'll sit there chit-chatting during like a horrible car accident. They become desensitized. You can't blame them.
Right.
Blame
Which is
this
natural.
Blame them for this. It happens, but you can't just ignore it. There are, again, these telltale signs. With the safety plan, things like access to lethal weapons, or people verbalizing, you know, why am I alive? Well, you know, why didn't I die? Right. Why him and not me? Why her and not me? They're talking about feeling guilt, sense of hopelessness. I don't really want to go forward. There's no purpose to life. And also look for medical conditions, medical and psychiatric conditions. Is there something currently affecting you? Or you diagnosed with a serious illness, a loved one with a serious illness, or a severe mental disorders. So, loved one diagnosed with bipolar disease, for instance,
Right.
and on medication. So safety plan is very critical and crucial to look at and to examine. But people need to be aware of themselves. That's part of the post-traumatic growth. What they can do to really change the narrative. One of the things that I do very often with my patients, and I have a very large patient population that's been injured, and many of them have acute sources of stress, many of them also have chronic sources of stress. And they have these negative thoughts. This sucks, pardon me.
Right.
This stinks. Life is terrible. Like people don't listen to me. My doctors couldn't care less about me. I have no money. Every time I go to workers' compensation hearing, they cut back my money. How am I supposed to live? I'm about to lose
These are
my
real
house.
problems.
Real problem.
It's not.
I'm about to lose my house. And they develop this negative narrative that repeats. And it's like going into a vortex. It gets worse and worse. It affects you emotionally, physically, cognitively, impacts your sleep. And if anything, it makes matters worse. So with many of my patients, I talk about changing the narrative. What do you want to change? How can you envision changing this narrative, changing the script that you have in your mind? What are some of the positives that you have? Folks, as long as there's life, there's always a possibility. Possibilities always exist. Life is worth living. There's good things about the life. If you're not seeing them, you're either incapable because of some problem that you have in seeing it, or finding them, or you haven't looked hard enough. And when you haven't looked hard enough and like you're that far out and things seem that desperate, that's a time that you probably need to reach out for professional help. We're talking about a psychoeducational component with people who are not necessarily professionals, and there's a lot of things that they can do, but you have to recognize when something is going too far and reach out and try to contact a professional.
Right. So the question is, a lot of the post-traumatic growth is actually not that uncommon. When you think about, somebody's loved one gets pancreatic cancer and they become active in raising money for a cure. And you can think of breast cancer, in Long Island, so many women have that, and yet, they all group together and they turn it into a positive and they feel good about it, and they could have easily said, hey, I lost a breast, that's, a piece of my body, and they could fall in, you could see how they would fall into depression,
Right.
but many don't. And
because the positive thing might be, my husband was very supportive. My children were very supportive. People came over to my house. They wanted to help me. I joined a support group. Those are the kinds of things that you would look for in post-traumatic.
So I think in the divorce situation, though, first of all, a lot of people stay away from you when you're going through it because they don't want to. I don't know if there's a psychological reason for it, but what I've seen is that when people get divorced, the married couples, they sort of keep their distance. Like they don't want to get contaminated with this bad divorce, so they stay away. You're in court for so many years, your family starts to say, I just can't keep going anymore, and everybody starts to talk, and you lose your support mechanism. And who's there for you? Other people who are miserable going through court. So then they end up talking to them, and they feed off each other's depression about how bad the system is and how it's corrupt and all these horrible things. And it's true, but I'd like to, how do we get somebody to do, like, I don't know what made me go the direction of saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to try to change the system. And I believe that kept me from going into, I was depressed. My kids were alienated, but I don't dwell on it all day long. I think about helping other people.
But that's just it. If you focus on the problem, first off, let me backpedal a little bit here. Many friends who are married don't really know what to do or feel uncomfortable because they don't want to take sides. They may have been friends with the husband. They might have been friends with the wife. They're not sure which way to go.
Right.
Also, many people who are facing individuals who are depressed, who had a loss, a death, they don't know what to say to you.
Right.
Hi, how's it going? How are you recovering? What are you doing?
Right.
Many people going through the trauma don't want to hear this. So friends and individuals who come in touch with these people need to respect that and give them the distance and the space that they need, but not cut them off.
Well, what do you say, Doc? Your friend is going through a bad divorce. You're watching the show. Thank God you're not, but your friend is going. You see that he's going downhill. He's gaining weight.
I'm there for you. Let's get together. Let's hang out. Let's go to a gym.
So just be there to listen.
Suggest alternatives. Suggest positive things. Focus. if you are a friend with somebody, you must know, being a friend, what your friend has liked in the past. You can pretty much go back to some of the things that were healthy and proactive and adaptive in that person's life. Did the person like to go to a restaurant every now and then? Did the person like to go bowling every now and then? So make a suggestion to go back to some of the things that were previously rewarding, and focus on the good things. I mean, the person may have children. You don't want to give up on your children.
Right.
You have a new place to live, a new community. What are some of the things that are out there in the new community? Modernly, with so much that can be done on the internet, and you go to libraries now, libraries are like incredible. Libraries are like miniature universities. You go to a library, you read, you can get videotapes, you can take educational programs. There's so much that can be done. You can't force somebody to do something. What you try to do is just let them know that you're there, and don't give up on them. Don't forget them. Don't fail to call them. Call on an occasion. It's your birthday. I wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Are you doing anything? Would you like to meet me? Would you like to come together? I have a barbecue. Would you like to come and give them the necessary distance that they need? It's a process. It's going to be a process, but it's going forward. It's a proactive
going in the right direction
process. You can't part. One of the problems and one of the things that I wanted to emphasize in post-traumatic growth and resilience and other things like mindfulness and positive psychology is that you do not want to dwell on the past. You don't want to over pathologize. You don't want to invest yourself only on this is what I did wrong, this is what my problem is, which is like the scope and focus of much of what takes place in therapy. You want to focus on going forward. What's positive? Right. What can I do that's positive? What's the good lives? What are the good things that I can do?
So is talking about that, if you're in a therapy group, you're going to be talking about the bad things. Is that counterproductive?
I think you need to learn from what the mistakes were, but you can't sit there dwell on it ad nauseum. There has to come a point in time where change the script, change the narrative. You have this narrative, change. I have patients do visual imagery where they take the record, turn it over. What do you put on the new record? I have this ability, I have this health, I have this skill. This is something that I can do. I have a friend who lives down the block who comes to visit me every now and then. Change the narrative. Right. It'll take some time to do, but that's the focus. We have what, about 2 minutes left?
Yeah, I think we have about 5 minutes left. So if you want, just a couple of things, and I'll let you do a recap. But one of the things I want to talk about is religion. Can that play a part in helping?
Very important. I mean, for people who have religion, this is a tremendous source of relief for them. I always welcome it and embrace it, and encourage patients who are in fact religious to attend.
But that's part of the post-traumatic growth. Some people could become, I guess, more religious during their depression and find comfort in that.
They will, and some religions have for instance, we're dealing with the Hispanic population. They talk about the hermanos, the brothers, and the hermanas, the sisters of the church, who actually come visit them. Right. They come visit them. They bring food, or they'll drive them if the person's physically injured, incapable of driving. These are some of the things that friends can do. Go visit somebody, bring food, drive them if they're physically incapacitated and they're not able to drive, or they're walking with a cane, or using a walker.
Well, I think that's from a layman's perspective. One of the things that I see is you have to have a purpose in life. And if you're going through a bad divorce and your kids are turned against you, you lost your money, you lost your house, you lost your job, you have to have a purpose for living. Yeah. And if that's helping other people, as you said, helping somebody with their groceries, sort of feeling needed. I mean, I think.
But sometimes you can create a new purpose. You don't have to sit there and relive or think on the things that like you thought that were important to you. What's important to you now? You're not going to recapture what was lost. What's important for you now? What's your purpose now? What direction do you want to take now? This is where I see people. They take courses. They develop a second career. I got you know, I went through I guess, you know, somewhat of a depression when I reached 50 or whatever. And I decided to study neuropsychology, and then I decided to study law school. My wife thinks that, you know, it's crazy to do it. But she's delighted now,
Right.
and I'm very pleased. But these are proactive steps that people can take.
So in the last 2 minutes that we have, you know, where would people go for help? Somebody's watching the show.
I wanted to encourage people to, if necessary, go to the website of the New York State Psychological Association. I'm currently past president of the New York State Psychological Association.
I think you'll always be past president.
Support it, and I'm also on the board of directors as a committee chair of veterans, you know, Veterans Committee. Of Suffolk County Psychological Association. Go to their websites, New York State Psychological Association, Suffolk County Psychological Association. They have tremendous number of resources, disaster relief network. There's educational pods of educational.
But
pods,
if somebody's
whatever they call
watching the show because they Googled, you know, suicide, divorce, and the show comes up and they're watching it, now they get to the end, where would they go to get help from, you know, from that? Or what would you say to somebody who's thinking about it? Because last time we did a show, you know, on suicide, people were commenting, you know, hey, I'm at the end of my road.
Well, when it's really that serious, you know, the obvious answer is to call 911.
But people don't do that on their own, though, do they?
No, but the obvious answer is 911.
Right.
They'll put you, you know, into somebody that's an expert in that area. But NISPA, New York State Psychological Association, and Suffolk County Psychological Association have wonderful in educational pieces, including for children. I mean, you know, we didn't talk about children, but children are traumatized by divorce or by the physical illnesses and
that's another
losses
show.
of their parents, which is another show.
So, you know, yeah, obviously children going through divorce do this also. And I think if we're going through a divorce, sometimes maybe we're wrapped up in our own problems and how horrible things are for us. We really can't forget about the kids, and those resources will be great for
and
that
children,
also.
depending on their age, they may feel responsible. They may think that they caused the divorce. They may think that mommy hates me, daddy doesn't, you know, whatever. They're having all sorts of crazy thoughts and emotions that are very much in turmoil. And depending on the age, older teenagers may become more sexually active. Kids may be bullied in school, made fun of. These are the kinds of things that children experience. You're the product of divorce. Ha ha ha.
Right, absolutely.
You know, children can be very cruel.
Dr. Aranda, thank you very much for being on the show. We'll definitely have you back again. Also, of course, you can reach out to Dr. Aranda. As I said, he's a forensic psychiatrist. He testifies. Psychologist. He testifies, and you know, he's definitely a great resource as well. And again, as I say, please share the show. You know, people watching this are involved in a divorce. Share it so other people can see it. You can save a life by clicking share.
Long Island Backstory is made possible in part by Americans for Legal Reform, the oldest, most successful legal group in the world. P.O. Box 2679, Huntington Station, New York 11746. Telephone 631-421-6390. Website Americans4legalreform.com. Long Island Backstory.
Todd's a great guy. I mean, look at him. What a sweetheart. Attaboy. Wait, Todd, what are you doing? How totally selfish and un-Todd-like of you. Come on, Todd. Come on, man.
Long Island Backstory.